the world of video is here to stay. It's growing tremendously. It's diversifying in its formats.
Audiovisual form of communication, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's for information, whether it's for education, is something that will stay for generations. In fact, will perhaps stay forever.
The companies that really win it are the companies that do understand that the environment is constantly changing, and investing in capabilities and flexibility, of being flexible and nimble and adjust quickly, are the ones that are going to win, and willing to experiment as well.
Creativity has got democratized to such a big deal that pretty much all of us can be fantastic creators. That's a very fundamental shift.
In a world where we are very used to, and we are prepared to fly into fog, clarity is the best thing a leader can do.
Everybody is a superhero. You got to believe that. So there's a Batman inside you. How are you bringing him alive? Whether we are the US Air Force, or whether we are, an education institution, or a great company like Google, you're finding like superheroes within the company and making them play to their best.
My name is Manish. I'm from the Marketing and Strategy Club here at LBS. Today, we're joined by three very special guests. I'll first introduce Jon, who's going to be hosting the chat. So, Jon has been involved with the Marketing and Strategy Club for longer than most of our students have been. He's had senior roles at Google and at YouTube in multiple markets, and he's founded Engage Video Group. We're also very honored to be joined by Rahul Welde, the global lead of digital transformation at Unilever. He joined the company in 1991. He's been doing a variety of roles. We're very honored to have you here today. Pedro Pina, again, very honored to have you. He's been with YouTube since 2021. Before that, he was at Google, where he's lead sort of lots of relationships like Nestlé, Unilever, etc. Jon, can I pass it over to you to kick this off?
Yes, thanks, Manish. Great to have you all here, and thanks so much for making the time. Personally, so honored to be speaking with you, Rahul, today, and you, Pedro, today. Two of the foremost leaders in the world of digital communication today, and just super excited to hear what we're going to speak about. We're planning to ask a few questions around careers, a bit about digital transformation, a bit about social video, then we'll go on to sort of some more in-depth questions around there. And as we have two guests talking today who both know each other, I would love you to take the opportunity to ask yourselves some questions and discuss what we bring up today. But I thought perhaps the best place to start, Pedro, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your career, which brings you to today being the head of YouTube in EMEA.
Again, thanks for having me today. It's truly a pleasure. I don't raise to the stature of Rahul, so for me it's also an honor to be on I don't know what I've done well, but I deserve to be interviewed next to Rahul, which is someone I deeply admired for the longest time, who has been having an incredible career at Unilever and a tremendous impact, not only in Unilever, but as everybody knows, Unilever is such an iconic brand and a company for a lot of other companies in the industry. So everyone's looking at what Unilever does, and a lot of what Unilever does is really what Rahul has been doing. So not sure exactly how I ended up in this conversation next to Rahul, but thanks for the opportunity. The long and short is I'm Portuguese, born in Lisbon 150 years ago, and I've had basically a career on FMCG. That's how I started it at FMCG company, started at P&G, moved to Pepsi and the retail part of Pepsi at some point in time, lived in the US for 5 years, Brazil for 2, and then I moved to Europe again after that stint and took my MBA, at INSEAD, and moved to the agency world for a significant amount of time, leading McCann Erickson. I was doing the Iberia job for a while my mom, personal touch, my mom was on her last 100 meters, if you will, and so I wanted to be close to her. And once my mom passed away, then I moved to London, and I started handling the relationship of the agency with some of the largest, biggest advertisers and accounts, which are complex in nature, and that was when my paths crossed Google. Google was looking for the capability of engaging with very, very large advertisers on a global level, and they were curious about what would be the best way to do it. And we've agreed that that would be a good idea for us for me to transition into Google and try to establish that same muscle on this side, and that's what I've done for a significant amount of time. And then last summer, and because of that, I was essentially managing the relationship of Google with these very, very large advertisers. Part of that relationship included being proficient in the video space and therefore in the YouTube space. So I knew YouTube deeply and intimately for the obvious reasons. We're talking about some of the largest advertisers spending a significant amount of their money on an investment on YouTube. So of course I knew this world very, very well. Time to change gears, and last summer I was invited to handle the entire business of YouTube for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is what I've been doing so far. I'm married, have a child. There's a number 2 coming up in 3 weeks, so we are excited about that. I also sit on the Diversity Council for Google across EMEA, and I'm the executive sponsor for LGBTQ chapter of Google across the region as well, and I sit on the Global Pride LGBTQ Council for the entire Google corporation. So all of this to say that I usually say I have a day job and I have a gay job. So my day job is what I just told you, and my gay job is driving all diversity initiatives generically and specifically for LGBTQ at Google on a global and regional basis.
Fascinating, and congratulations. Yeah, I'm sure your life's going to get a lot busier soon. And what a fascinating journey from the FMCG space through to YouTube, and super excited to dive into some of the learnings and what you've seen over the last while in that space. And it's such a fast-moving space, which I think is what makes it so interesting. A lot of the rules which were learned, 3 years ago, not relevant in 2022 anymore. And talking about FMCG, handing over to Rahul. Rahul, what a fascinating career you've had, spanning a lot of similar sort of learnings to Pedro. It would be great to hear your journey, which brings you to amazing career at Unilever, ending as the sort of global head of digital transformation within the business.
Thanks, Jon, LBS, for inviting me. Thanks, Pedro, for the really, really kind words. I'm very flattered and honored to listen to all that. And what an illustrious career that Pedro has narrated. And I'm sure that as we speak over the next few minutes, I could listen to him pretty much all day, because there are so many experiences throughout that fantastic career. Mine is actually, you would have seen that Pedro's journey has been very, very multifaceted and versatile. And mine is perhaps in many ways exactly the opposite. Nearly 31 years with Unilever, fresh out of MBA, and straight away joined the company as a trainee, pretty much learned to walk the street in a manner of speaking in FMCG parlance. And then throughout those 31 years, did a variety of roles. I started in finance, incidentally, and then moved on to doing business, marketing, eventually landed up doing media. And while I was doing media, I think it was around 2008, 2009, Beijing Olympics, I distinctly remember, when, in a manner of speaking, the digital revolution had started taking off. Now almost it seems like, what even are we talking about? Because it seems so blindingly obvious. And that is when I got really interested in this whole fast growing space. So we're talking about 10, 15 years ago, almost. And that's where then I got interested in digital, started learning the ropes, much to do with China those days, as I was in Singapore. And then 2016, I moved to London to lead digital transformation for Unilever. Very interestingly, I am actually not, I didn't grow up, and I'm sure, many of us on the call had different ambitions, aspirations as we were growing up. And then eventually, life takes a turn and you land up where you land up. So I actually grew up with the aspiration of being a fighter pilot and serving in the Indian Air Force. And that was all that I was obsessed by, throughout my childhood and in fact, all my growing years right up until college. And for very good reasons, perhaps in hindsight, but definitely at that point in time, it seems like really, really terrible thing to happen is I didn't make the cut to the Indian Air Force, and then I joined my MBA, and then subsequently Unilever. I say all this just to talk about a couple of different aspects of my life. I'm driven, very highly driven by what I call as purpose and passion. And purpose to me is a lot about service to others and really benefiting, whether it's the industry, the company, the community. And certainly I take a great deal of interest, especially among the youth and students. I chair a charity called the Migrant Leaders in the UK, where we help students, bright students who are essentially first generation or second generation immigrants into the UK to settle down and have great careers. So purpose is really something that I am super enthusiastic about. And the second thing is passion. And I'm a big sports fan. As you can see, big Liverpool fan football, but equally a big cricket and Formula One fan as well. So I love to therefore believe that, everything that I do I must surround myself either with purpose and passion and great people, of course. That's how my journey has been. I'm at a stage where I'm thinking hard as to, what next. And how do I actually carve out and be able to give back very strongly. I mentioned earlier about engaging with the youth and students, and I think there's a lot, because I really believe that that's the future. I'm a proud dad of twin boys who are now, one of them has just become a doctor, the other guy is graduated last year and works in the US, and we have a daughter who's 15-year-old. But I have to say that, I'm generally speaking, buzzing in my mind always, and just too much on energy, and always looking to slow down, something that I've never been able to successfully accomplish. But nevertheless, that's a little bit about me, and I'm really looking forward to an engaging conversation.
Thank you, Rahul, and congratulations on your son becoming a doctor. That must be really exciting. And so I guess, Rahul, a lot of your time and energy is invested in trying to understand what the digital future looks like. I can imagine that a big part of digital transformation is working on what's coming, what's here at the moment, what matters and what doesn't. And of course, a really big part of that is social video. And I think, it's so fascinating when you add all the pieces of social video happening on the internet together to, it's probably the biggest media channel in the world for a lot of people, and very close to the biggest media channel of them all. I guess a really interesting question, just going back to you, Pedro, is within the world of YouTube today, what excites you the most, and what sort of gives you the most energy in your role today?
What excites me the most is as you were saying, the fact that the space, the world of video is here to stay. It's growing tremendously. It's diversifying in its formats, and it's in the way it engages with users on a daily basis, is establishing different roles in your life. It now has a passive role, it has a social role, it has an active role, it has an engaging role. It comes in all different ways, shapes, and forms. It gets you on short format, it gets you on long format. If you want to know something for 2 hours, you can connect with it live and connect and engage with communities around the world on a live basis. You can be on demand whenever you want. It's in all surfaces. Our performance on connected TVs in living rooms is out of control growing, as well as continues to be very important on mobile surfaces and desktop surfaces. So the video world is surrounding us, and the growth is unparalleled and continues to grow. I mean, you see with actors like TikTok showing that the video formats keep changing all the time and keep adapting to users' searches. We now have shorts on YouTube, which took off with billions and billions of views on a daily basis. I mean, it's just it continues to evolve. So what excites me the most is see this unparalleled growth and diversification of formats and presence in users' lives. It's just fascinating to see how that is, and it's great to see how users at home and consumers are adapting to it as well, and how they are shaping their lives also around it, and this interaction is just incredibly fascinating. It's also incredibly complex, but that's also very interesting and energizing for me. So there are a lot of questions about how how this will be sustainable in the future, and how the role of regulators and the role of governments as they're trying to also establish some rules on what can be running in these platforms and what is okay to run in these platforms. So there is this. The future is full of opportunity, and it's also full of challenges associated to those opportunities. So the world was never so complex in this area, but at the same time so exciting. And that's really what drives me. It gives me tons of energy. I mean, if this was just launching and benefiting, it would just not be an interesting job. So it's just, I think we're going to have really, really fascinating, interesting 5 years ahead around this.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And I can imagine the complexity if I think about how different watching YouTube at home on our TV is versus watching YouTube Shorts on my phone. It feels like it almost must be running two different businesses in a lot of ways. Obviously, a lot of really great beneficial overlap. How do you try and sort of package those together and take them to clients?
Well, it's an ever-evolving proposition. And actually, the clients that are successful in this space are the clients that understand that. So, and Unilever is actually one of them. So there have been a lot of clients, and talk about digital transformation, there have been a lot of clients who are just wanting to go through another phase of knowledge and just establish fundamental rules and then stay with those rules for a long time. And what we've been exploring with a lot of our partners is this understanding that is not the case. This is something that is evolving every 3 months, is evolving every 6 months. We're collecting feedback every 6 months. We are adapting our offering every 6 months. It's an ongoing process. So we have to get out of this mentality of let's plan for the year and that's it, lock in. This is what we have. There's no one else. There's nothing new. Let's just maximize for what we know. That the world of managing budgets on a 12 months basis with established rules and an established knowledge and a framework, it's gone. So the companies that really win it are the companies that do understand that the environment is constantly changing, and investing in capabilities and flexibility of being flexible and nimble and adjust quickly are the ones that are going to win, and willing to experiment as well, because we keep launching new. As we engage with users at different surfaces at different moments, we invite a lot of our advertisers to also experiment as much as possible and to get as much learning as possible to incorporate into the way they operate. It's a way more complex world than it was 10 years ago to do marketing. Marketers have to have skills today that they didn't have before, and what it takes to win today is very, very different from what it would take to win 10 years ago. So it's all about flexibility, nimbleness, willing to risk and to learn. And so our successful relationship with clients are the ones who have those characteristics, who are willing to sit at a table and understand that we are cooking all the time. This is not about preparing a meal and being ready to go. We are cooking all the time. And Unilever has been a wonderful partner in doing this. They got it. They got it, and they've designed structures around it that get them to be the excellent advertisers they are today.
What an amazing philosophy of cooking all the time. And I guess the challenge within companies is trying to build your companies so that you can change these things in a real-time environment. And I guess the bulk of companies, the history of companies has not been like that. And it feels like a fascinating future to build your companies to be way more agile. Rahul, perhaps some thoughts from your side on this sort of like ever-changing environment, specifically of social video, before we sort of get into some of the other areas you focus on.
Yeah, I think, firstly, my reflection is similar to what Pedro mentioned. Video has been there around for a long time, but if we see the evolution, in many ways over the last few years with the digitization, it's changed very, very dramatically, right? So it's almost like digital video altered the face of video forever. Otherwise, we always knew it as TV and movies. And video to me is a very paradoxical environment. It's a paradox because on one hand, we have the fantastic television sets, which we are watching great content on, whether it's sports or otherwise. And then on the other hand, millions of minutes are spent on pretty much handsets. So you've got this big screen, beautiful experience, and then you've got this small screen, amazing experience. And much the same way, actually, you know, we spend, the entire industry spends a ton of money producing blockbusters like Avengers, you know, high budget, really beautifully produced, absolutely terrific films or video content. And on the other hand, what happens is that something which is shot on a handheld camera goes and becomes very famous on YouTube. So as marketers, as business people, as observers of what's happening in pop culture, we've got to manage this paradox very, very well, because we can't just lock ourselves into one form of video or another form of video. And indeed, you referred to social video. Pedro talked about the idea that it's cooking all the time. So the reality is that this is a very fast moving space. And in the fast moving space, we're going to be able to see changes. Some of them actually will be brought about by innovators, both on the side of the platforms, but equally on the form of creators, right? So today, for example, anybody who has a camera pretty much is a big creator, whether it's on YouTube or any of the other platforms. And that's a very fundamental shift where from the perspective of whether it is production or creation, creativity has got democratized to such a big deal that pretty much all of us can be fantastic creators. So to my mind, therefore, video is really a fascinating subject. I think it is perhaps one of those which is going to be enduring throughout, no matter what happens around, right? So we'll have the gaming and we'll have the metaverse and we'll have everything else that will be happening around. But the audio-visual form of communication, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's for information, whether it's for education, is something that will stay for generations. In fact, will perhaps stay forever. And therefore, certainly, you know, platforms like YouTube and, you know, all of us who are engaged in that space of video are going to have a great, great time, regardless of everything that happens around. There is a point which was alluded to around this idea of agility and real time. And I completely agree with this notion that we have to be responsive and we can't be, you know, stuck in a particular plan. And at the same time, it's again paradoxical because we know that there are some tentpole moments and tentpole occasions which happen through the year, whether it is sports, whether it is the Oscars, whether it's the Grammys, but there is a whole lot of stuff which pretty much can be planned, right? So from a marketing standpoint, therefore, again, we have to learn to manage this paradox of saying, hey, you know what, around the tentpoles and around the big events, whether we're going to be making sure that we are there. And at the same time, be extremely fleet-footed to seize every single opportunity which comes our way on almost, like you mentioned, John, on a real-time basis. So Pedro referred to the complexity, right? And I think the complexity in itself is very, very fascinating and very challenging. So you have to be continuously on your toes, and both from the perspective of mind and then, you know, the thinking into action, be extremely fleet-footed. That's how I would sum up to say that it's an exciting space for sure, but absolutely requires us to be on the edge in a positive way and staying abreast of what's going on and then responding to it.
Yeah, fascinating, Rahul. Perhaps, Pedro, you could talk a little bit about the sort of companies, the way you have to build companies. I remember when I was at Google.
I said something before, just to comment on what you said, which is so true. He brought the word, or he picked up something that I mentioned before about complexity, and it's really, really true. The companies that are able to make significant advances and making great progress on their digital journey are the ones who are naturally designed to handle complexity. So there has been companies, and even in the fast-moving consuming goods industry, there's companies that tend to have an approach of simplifying. A lot of the companies are doing are known for wanting to simplify their SKU level, or to simplify their categories, or simplify their organizations, or simplify. Companies that are focused on simplifying, in my experience, they have not been designed to handle digital very, very well. Companies that are very, very comfortable with complexity, who have always included complexity in their DNA, and don't see complexity as an obstacle that needs to be fought, but they take complexity as something that is structural about the way the business has to be conducted. Those are the companies that tend to do better in the digital space. So it's fascinating when you look at, for instance, the fast-moving consumer goods landscape, and you look at those companies. Companies designed to handle complexity are doing it much better than others. Sorry, just wanted to draw that point that I think it's important.
Thank you, Pedro.
Because people sometimes, what are the capabilities? What do you need to do? What are the things? One of the things I usually say is start by embracing complexity as opposed to fight it. Like, you have the classic one of, I've had so many conversations with CMOs and said, but what are the 3 things I need to nail on YouTube? And my answer is, you don't have to nail 3 things. You have to nail 50. And if your company is not willing to nail 50, then you're not prepared for YouTube. And like people say, but what is the key metric? I say, well, there are 15 metrics. And if you don't want to manage 15 metrics, please don't do it digital investment, because clearly you're not prepared to handle it. So I'm sorry to say, when we are hiring MBAs and stuff, I always say when I go into those big meetings in universities to do a hiring drive or whatever, I always say, if you don't like ambiguity and if you don't like complexity, please don't come work for us, because it's just you're not, and that's okay. It's very okay. It's just not, you're not just designed for digital. It's just not your thing. Does that make sense?
It's very true. Spot on. I mean, it couldn't have been said better. I think, sorry, John, we probably, but like you said, we
please do
discussion. So
yeah, no, please do.
Preempt you. But one other thing which I've always, in the last few years, especially, I've very strongly believed in the context of digital and digital marketing, is that speed is the new currency, right? So you can have all the currencies that you want and you can think anything. But if at the end of a conversation, at the end of a day, you are not able to get on with it. So this idea of nailing it for perfectness, and whether it's 3 things or 4 things, in fact, I'm actually quite comfortable not nailing it at all and figuring it out as you go along, because you nail something today and you discover that, no, it doesn't work, but you got to be able to adapt and swivel very fast and stay on the ball. So of course, and embracing complexity is a very, very big part of it. In fact, actually, I feel like very often frameworks and very, very sort of patterned thinking holds us back from some of the creative unleash as well. One of the biggest changes that digitization has brought about is unleashing creativity. Just think about it, right? So if you think about a platform like YouTube, it has just unleashed creativity. Beyond none of the creators who actually, were doing music and stuff like that actually thought they would hit 1 billion views like they do on YouTube within that period of time. It would have never happened. But for this idea that both on the creative side as well as the publishing side, suddenly you've got this massive explosion, and pretty much therefore, I don't know what the stats say, but I'm sure there are billions of minutes or maybe more, which are watched every day on YouTube alone, right? So I think this is a very interesting dimension, and it's happening all around us. I spend personally a lot of time, I'm sure most of us do. Here's one other thing, right? So we have popularly thought that a lot of the video is all about entertainment, music, movies, shows, and that's absolutely true. But Pedro will tell us, I'm sure, that a large part of viewership is on how-to videos. And I promise you that certainly for me, the how-to, if I have a go-to place on, I'm really struggling with something, there is always a YouTube answer on how to do whatever it is, right? So again, and that's people like you and me, crowdsourced videos, which we can put up. So this is a very multi-dimensional subject almost, right? Because we could go from any angle and figure that all of it is true. So yeah, very exciting.
You're right, and on the speed, I could not be more in agreement with you. I mean, what a lot of fast-moving consuming goods companies forget is the F of fast. I mean, the solution is on F, and they forget to be fast. And there has been for a while in this industry, there has been always a conversation about why do independent brands are doing so well. A part of it is because they're incredibly fast, and so a big corporation making a big corporation fast is really, really hard. It's easy when you have 15 employees doing creams on your basement. I mean, of course it's easy to, but still, big corporations need to look at those small companies and understand what do they nail very well. I mean, of course they're close to the consumer. Of course they get direct feedback. Of course they're more nimble. They have a lot of characteristics which are interesting, but one of them, to your point, Rahul, is speed. And fast-moving consumer goods industry forgot about the F a long time ago. And those who don't are better at digital. Now, Jon, before you hate us, I'm sure you want to.
I wrote a summary for this session, and I was like, the less I talk, the more the session is a success. So this is good. I'm nailing it. Anything you want to say there, Rahul?
No, I think there's another dimension which crosses my mind as I listen to and engage in this conversation, which is, most leaders, especially in the digital universe, there are two things they're likely to say, not most actually. In fact, 100% of the leaders and operators in the digital space will say two things. One, they will say something like, I wish it could be done faster, right? The fastest companies on the planet are saying to each other, I wish I could do that faster. So speed, right? The second, which almost all leaders will say, oh, I wish I had done it before. I wish I had thought about it last year. Because what happens is that, the speed at which things scale up, it becomes all too obvious. And you look at each other and say, hey, guys, why didn't we think about it last year? Or somebody thought about it last year and we tossed that idea out. So this, because the space is so fast moving, evolving, whichever word we use, the reality is that we are going to find more and more ideas getting born pretty much every day. And we're only talking about one dimension over here about video, but in digital and, whether it is Google or any other big platform, there are so many different dimensions, right? Which have revolutionized pretty much the way we live, right? Think about Google Maps, think about YouTube, think about Google Search. Pretty much, actually, it's perhaps the largest utility company in the world. I don't know if they call it that or not, but I suspect it is the #1 utility company in the world. Unbeatable, unparalleled in scale, right? Billions of people doing searches, billions of people doing videos, maps, all that stuff. So this reframing in our minds of what's happening around is very important. And some of it comes from taking a step back and a bird's eye view of what's going around. And some of it goes from sort of from operator's lens when you actually begin to see, the things moving around. Yeah. But I mean, obviously, I very exciting from my perspective. A lot of stuff which is going on right now is actually here and now. And I promise you, if you were to have a conversation a month later, we'll already have new subjects to talk about.
Fantastic, Rahul. One of the things that we were hoping to touch on is the sort of intersection of e-commerce within the space of video. And I wondered, Pedro, if you just wanted to touch a bit on what's exciting you in that space and what you think the future is. And one of the things which has been fascinating to see is the rise of immediate delivery. And that sort of makes this sort of spontaneous purchase perhaps a bigger part of what's happening in the world. Just be fascinated to hear your point of view on the sort of leading edge of what's happening in that intersection of e-commerce and video.
Yeah, so e-commerce, first of all, e-commerce has progressed tremendously. It was already in an unparalleled growth path before the pandemic, and the pandemic basically changed everything. A lot of the companies, I mean, a lot of my clients, Unilever was not one of them, but a lot of my clients in the past used to say, as we were having conversations about e-commerce, they'll say, well, we're trying to figure out. And then during the pandemic, said we need to speed up e-commerce. I'm like, no kidding. Because all companies had to quickly understand how to jump into online purchasing, which was forced upon you by the pandemic. It was forced upon you as a business, and it was forced upon users who were even hesitant about jumping into e-commerce. They had no other option than just do it. So things for e-commerce became were deeply transformed by the pandemic, and we're still seeing the rest of it on this post-pandemic era. But companies and users rewire the way they're looking at the opportunity of e-commerce. So this is the first thing that needs to be said, and that is incredibly exciting. It brings all sorts of different other challenges, but that is fundamental. That is a massive shift that happened in just 2 years. There's the well-known Wall Street Journal article that said that e-commerce evolved in 9 months what it took 10 years to evolve. So it's just a tremendous shift. Back to the way we started the conversation, and then we have video, which is part of our lives and is infusing our lives everywhere. So the meat of these two worlds was just going to be inevitable, right? So e-commerce is now part of your lives. You are rewiring yourself as a user. You are rewiring yourself as a business. And at the same time, video has grown tremendously also because of the pandemic. And video is coming to you in different ways, shapes, and forms. And of course, these two worlds are going to collide. And obviously, there is a huge space in the future for video commerce, and Google, Google and YouTube in particular is very, very vested on it. So we're putting a very significant amount of investments behind it. We want to do it well, and we want to do it properly. It is way more complex than what people think. It's incredibly hard to do an experience that works well for the user, works well for the retailer, and on for the brand. Fulfillment, payments, tax. It's incredibly hard to nail it well at scale. I mean, YouTube is now it's now a platform that touches 2 billion users, roughly 50% of the people online on a daily basis. So it's, it's when we have to nail something, we really need to nail it well because the scale is tremendous. But we are very focused at doing it very well. We have a bunch of experiments and products and trials that are going incredibly, they seem very promising, and no doubt, because these are trends that are bigger than us. The video is around us, and commerce has been deeply wired on us during the pandemic. So the world will collide on those two, and we will see that very, very clearly being expressed, certainly on YouTube and all the other video platforms for sure.
Thank you, Pedro. Rahul, it would be great to hear your thoughts on the space. Obviously, as a retailer, as a sort of creator of FMCG goods, understanding that sort of direct-to-consumer relationship feels very interesting. The rise of immediate delivery feels really interesting. It'll be fascinating to hear your point of view on e-commerce, and if any part of that sort of touches on specifically the video side, that'd be fascinating to hear too.
Yeah, I think this is a great question again, but if you take a strategic view, then we really see in the a big convergence of commerce and content, right? And on one hand, therefore, you have a platform like YouTube, which is then beginning to address this entire e-commerce opportunity, and equally a large number of e-commerce players are using content, and I'm using content much broader than video over here to power all their offerings. If we take a step back, it was just about 6 years ago, 2016, 2017, if we had a conversation like this, we would be talking about e-commerce and really thinking about Amazon, maybe thinking about Tesco.com, Sainsbury.com, and that was about it. And fast forward now, you have social commerce, you have proximity commerce, you have instant commerce. I don't know what else I might be missing, but there are 5, 6, 7 different versions or evolutions of that fast moving space which have taken place. But the headline for me is that there is definitely a convergence of commerce and content. It's very interesting, so we think of e-commerce as transactional, stuff that Jon, Pedro, and Rahul buy. We go to a website and we buy some stuff. And it's very interesting, a study which was done, and I remember this from about a few years ago, that a large amount of time is actually doing window shopping on e-commerce. I don't know, many of us over on this chat will relate to it, that it's not always that you spend half an hour on a site. Sometimes you go functionally to buy, you just buy and out of there. But occasionally, very often, you get onto a site and you surf. Pretty much like, we would do window shopping walking on the high street in London. So that's again a form of, whether you call it entertainment, leisure, or some. So this idea of what is e-commerce is, to my mind, going to evolve way beyond the functional and transactional. As it evolves beyond the functional and transactional, marketers and platforms like YouTube will have a big role to play, because suddenly then you're actually beginning to think of commerce very differently. And indeed, there is definitely a fast-paced acceleration which will continue. I think from here on, it will be far more robust, because hopefully we don't have the makings of a pandemic and that kind of an acceleration curve again. But it's definitely a steady and a strong incline upwards. And there is another layer which I think is beyond e-commerce as we know it, which is beyond goods, right? And that's the whole sort of services layer, a layer of financial microtransactions. I mean, think about it, and I'm now talking about digitization in a broader sense, but a platform like Robinhood suddenly democratized how people could trade in shares. It was essentially digitization of the stock exchange 2.0, Of course, stock exchanges were digitized, make no mistake about it. But Robinhood took it to a totally different level, right? And the same thing is happening almost across each industry, where the microtransactions on commerce are overtaking, the big sort of purchases or just commerce as we know it. I think it's really, really fascinating. The convenience it offers is tremendous, and therefore, certainly as practitioners in the industry, we have to make sure that we invest more and more capability and time behind this significant area.
Thanks, Rahul. Pedro, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there, but if not, perhaps one of the commerces we didn't speak about there is the sort of influencer creator economy type commerce. And it just feels like such a big part of the world. That whole sort of everyone will have their 5 minutes of fame feels truer than ever today. And it just feels like so much of the content which is watched in the world does come from the segments of the sort of world. Just wanted to get your view, Pedro, on what you're seeing in that space, specifically just around influencers. Obviously, it's been sort of like a 10, 15-year journey for YouTube in this space. What does it feel like today in 2022 and maybe how it's different to the past?
I'm not a huge fan of the word influencer because every time someone calls themselves influencers, they immediately cut back half of their equity. Because what really, really works, the reason why certain people can influence others is because they are authentic about it. The moment, you can talk about, I was talking to a bunch of creators the other day from the Netherlands, and I was talking about their very successful YouTube channels and how they were going, and they told me something very interesting. They said the moment they post a video that says sponsored by a brand, their views collapse immediately, and the effectiveness of those videos is very, very poor for them. Now they continue to do it because they need to feed their family and they want to get money, but it's super interesting to think about this, right? So the moment we call creators influencers, immediately what it feels like is that this is being purposely manipulated. The messaging has been manipulated to convince you to this. And the one thing that YouTube did as an open platform was to use the words of Rahul, democratize this messaging, that instead of being a one-way coming from closed environments like broadcasting or whatever, actually became, which were just basically telling you the information they wanted you to tell you. The open platforms allow for the communication to be authentic, not to be controlled by anyone, and to be and for that interaction to exist. And that has been the world of YouTube forever and ever. So that continues to be true. And what makes YouTube creators successful, when you look at all of them, is their authenticity, is the fact that they really truly believe what they're saying, and their fans know that. And the moment that gets tinkered with, it's the moment they start losing it, right? So that's the first thing, and that has been the story of YouTube. So it's not a story of influencing. It's just a story of giving someone else a voice and show them the world. And when you have a camera and an idea, the beauty thing about YouTube is that then you can have 2 billion people that may be interested in hear what you want to say. The one evolution that we've seen happening that I find fascinating is that the definition of what a YouTuber has changed. Yes, it continues to be the kid on its bedroom doing, makeup tutorials. It could be that. But now you have big organizations and big cultural institutions or big broadcasters actually being YouTube creators as well. I was just with the Netherlands as well, the Opera and Ballet of Amsterdam, and during lockdown they did not have any audience. They had to shut down, and they had a body of ballet dancers that had nothing to do, and they were on lockdown. So what they decided to do was to create a YouTube channel with our help to teach children at home how to dance ballet. The YouTube channel is a huge success, and in fact, now that they've opened up, the channel continues to operate and makes money for the organization. Now they're teaching not only Dutch kids at home how to do ballet, but actually the audience, 70% of it is from outside of the Netherlands. So it's actually the opera and ballet Institute of the Amsterdam, it actually has a global audience who's interested in learning ballet from those dancers. And so we saw this with Opera in Madrid. We see this over and over again. Organizations are always, and can be also, a YouTube channel, because again, if you have an idea and if you have a camera, you pretty much can, and if you have an idea that you feel it's compelling in a camera, you can pretty much reach a global audience very, very quickly. And so what we see is a diversification of the small, a YouTuber can be a small, just a starting kid on its bedroom, like we've always known, or the gamer, but it also can be an organization. It can be a broadcaster. The latest record from Ed Sheeran was launched with us. I mean, he premiered snippets of his, Ed Sheeran, first of all, started at YouTube, has to be said, and so his career exploded after that. But as he was launching his new album, he did it through us with snippets of the new songs and getting engagement from the team. So you have the multi-award-winning musician down to the regular creator that you've always known, to a cultural institution, or governments even sometimes. They can use YouTube as a channel to communicate and engage with their users. And that is actually, and I prefer not to call them influencing. I just prefer to speak about engagement and creativity.
Thanks, Pedro. It's fascinating to see all of the different types of content which are ending up in a sort of live streaming environment. Rahul, you said you're a big fan of the Formula One, and I mean, it's just fascinating to see how there's that shift of how you access this kind of content. Previously, it had to be through a sort of like cable provider, satellite provider, and today, you can kind of watch it through the app. It feels like there's just such a fascinating shift in this direct-to-consumer environment for great content. And obviously a lot of it going through the likes of YouTube.
Multi-platform, John, what's happened is like a lot of this stuff is now really multi-platform. If you take a consumer view of what's happening, we are all toggling between different things, during the day or throughout the day. And pretty much, therefore, especially in the entire world, you'll see that it's about a number of platforms which we engage with. Many of them actually, so this idea of the creator economy, or the creator you refer to, or influencer, but I prefer the word creator over here, is essentially about all of us being creators. Actually, this session is being recorded. So guess what? You're a creator right now, for having pulled us together. And I don't know where it is published, but visualize it as going beyond the land. You'll see that, okay, so really, so we've all now, every time that we engage with each other, in video or any form, we are creating content, and lots of that is going and then sitting in the universe, and hopefully people find it exciting enough to watch. The other thing to remember in this is that we end up talking about things which have become very successful, whether it's creators, influencers, videos, and so on. But behind that one piece of success, right, there are thousands, millions of pieces which have been shot in different places. And guess what? I mean, how many videos have we made? Like, my boys are now 24, but I remember when they were toddlers and kids, you make their videos, and only you, and not even you actually, only the grandparents are interested in those, right? But they make for great viewing. You say, okay, like, can we stop this now? Because it's a little too much. Who wants to watch? But so this idea of technology enabling on one hand to create content, and then with platforms like YouTube to be able to publish it to a massive, wide global audience is just unbelievable power in the hand of a creator. And creativity is all about power of expression, letting sort of yourself imagine and bringing it to life. And what a fascinating way to be able to do that with all the toys and gizmos that we have on our hand these days.
Fascinating, Rahul. One question with only 7 minutes to go, and want to be respectful of your time. One question I'd love to hear both of your points of view on, which we always ask in this London Business School speaker series, both coming from companies where culture is a really big part of what has made them succeed, and leadership. It would be great to hear both Pedro and Rahul as a sort of like final question. Just your point of view on the power of great culture, the power of great leadership in the organizations which you've been a part of, and how that's helped the success which we see in front of us today.
Oh, that's easy. Well, the best definition I've heard of leadership came from, surprise, surprise, Anna Wintour, at Vogue US, and she says leadership is clarity. And I really fundamentally believe in this. In a world where we are very used to, and we are prepared to fly into fog, clarity is the best thing a leader can do. And if there's one thing that that I have to say, is something that I experienced inside Google and YouTube, is that we spend a very, very significant amount of time, leaders spend a very significant amount of time being very, very clear about what we're trying to achieve. So it's the counterpoint to the complexity and ambiguity that we talked about before. You have to absorb, you have to assume and embrace complexity, you have to assume ambiguity, but what you have to do with your organization in order for them to thrive is to be very clear about where you want them to go, and very clear about what success looks like, and what good, and create an environment that allows them to succeed in a world that is very, very clear what the direction should be. Now that environment you need to create, it's about culture, and the culture is about, of course, values, and I'm very, very happy to work in a company which coincides 100% the values with mine. And that is the only way I believe you can operate as well. I don't think the culture at Google and YouTube is the only good culture that there exists. There are a lot of different companies that are incredibly successful today, which have dramatically different cultures from mine. I just think you are the most, your best self, and you are the most effective in organizations where there is a coincidence, there is a perfect coincidence between your values and that of the organization you serve on. I also believe that the digital environment, one where ambiguity and complexity and speed is required, I believe that psychological safety is probably one of the elements that has to underpin the culture you live in, because you need to allow your people to be risk takers, to embrace failure, to experiment, to defy power, speak truth to power. That those are things that make, in a world where the variables keep changing all the time, if you're in a leading position, you need a team that tells you the truth, that speaks truth to you. And for that, you need to create an environment that allows for that to happen. A lot of companies don't do that, and I don't think they're particularly designed to face the current world, and especially one that requires digital transformation, where there's a lot of unknown variables that can hit you from the left field, right? And you need to be prepared to do it. So these are my two thoughts about leadership and values. I mean, I could go on and on about the definition of culture of Google and YouTube, which is incredibly boring, and you can go online and find out. I mean, there's a lot of lovely things about diversity and I could do, but I don't think that's what you want to hear, right? So I think this is probably an angle that I think is probably more useful.
Yeah. Thank you, Pedro. What a great answer. And I think that's just that Anna Wintour quote feels so powerful. And I think every leader in the room, as you hear it, you can't help but ask yourself the question, like, am I bringing enough clarity to my team? And it definitely feels like a lasting question, which I'll take from this session. So thank you very much. Rahul, over to you.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said resonates. I see it as like the ethos of an organization, particularly in business, but even otherwise, is very important. It defines actually, many ways how the organization lives, thrives, and grows. Great places to work, Google, Unilever, and so many others, you will see they all have a culture which allows for a certain degree of bonding, which is stronger than what can get created by just being employees of an organization. So whether it is consumer centricity, whether it is innovation, whether it's creativity, there's so many dimensions, and not all of them can be distilled and crystallized into how we would define and write a book. It is really about how you feel and how you make others feel, right? So, and therefore, from an organizational standpoint, it is really important that people actually live the culture rather than, be listening to PowerPoints or, what is being said about what the value. Actually sort of living the space is most important. From an individual standpoint, that identification of where you belong and what you are a part of is really important. Like in my instance, for example, I've been nearly 31 years Unilever, my entire journey. Not for a day did I feel like I was not at home, right? For a variety of reasons. It doesn't mean I had lots of ups and downs in my career, by the way. Lots of downs, lots of ups, lots of time I got smacked on my face. Perhaps a few times I did that as well. But the reality is that at each point in time, you were into it because you really belonged over there. So, and this does not mean that a culture is better than the other and so on and so forth. Of course, people at the end of the day want to work for great companies, great leaders, and with great people, by the way. Let us not underestimate the power of peers, particularly in today's world, where, it is much easier to engage with peers. So I want to work with great people, period, right? And therefore, that really means that you create an entire culture of whether it's an organization, a team, or a micro team, which is about a lot of common thinking, fundamentally on the values and the robustness of the values. I think it's fair to say that lots of books are written on it, lots of videos are made, movies, and we all know that finally, winning culture is a lot about collaboration and teamwork, something which is often, so the days, I think these are the days where everybody is a superhero. You got to believe that, right? Not that there is Superman who's a superhero or Batman who's a superhero. So there's a Batman inside you. How are you bringing him alive? There's a Superman inside Pedro. How is he coming alive? And once we begin to think of that, and whichever way, whatever we begin to do then, whether we are the US Air Force or whether we are, an education institution or a great company like Google, basically you're finding like superheroes within the company and making them play to their best. Again, could go on endlessly, but what a terrific discussion, and perhaps allow you to wrap up, Jon.
Rahul, thank you so much. I absolutely love that everyone's a superhero, and I think asking ourselves like what a superhero is feels like a really great use of time. So thank you for leaving us with that last thought. Personally feeling so smarter after today's session. I've written down so much on in my book here, and just wanted to say a massive thank you. I know you're both super busy. And just on behalf of everyone from the London Business School and the other universities who joined us here today, just a huge thank you for your time and energy. Most appreciated.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed the discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.